Good evening, good afternoon, good whatever time of day it is you're watching this video. Welcome to my weekly Node-RED development live stream. I'm Nick O'Leary, project lead of the Node-RED project, here with an hour or so of Node-RED development work. So this is more focused on working on developing Node-RED rather than using it. Interestingly, I did get a comment on last week's video, someone asking for some more streams that are more user-oriented. Now, I might not do those in this slot, my Monday 8 PM. This is more about developing Node-RED. But yeah, I certainly think there's space for us to do some more regular user-oriented sessions. So keep an eye out. I don't know when, but yeah, for sure, I think that'd be a cool thing to do. Whether it's me or whether we try and organise something with more people in the community, doing some live streaming, doing some stuff for the community, I don't know, but we'll see. We'll see how we go. So yeah, if you're on Twitch, do say hi in the chat. If you're on YouTube, do like and leave a comment and say hi. Soft2k, Michelle, good to see you guys there already, as ever. Welcome back. Zoramil, hello, welcome, welcome, welcome. So what have we got in store tonight? Well, we're just doing some good old-fashioned bug fixing. There was a bug report came in on the forum. Some of you may have seen it, to do with dragging a node into the workspace. And if you're zoomed out of your flow, then it can unexpectedly drop the node over some wires and wire it in. I'll show you what it is. I'm just getting my environment set back up, resetting things back to the master branch. So I've been doing lots of stuff in the 2.0 branch today, so just getting things a little tidied up so not to confuse matters. Good, let's reload that. Ooh, interesting. Sorry, I paused because, right, let's see what's going on. I try and do things properly and then it all starts going wrong. So, this is a clean checkout of the master branch, freshly built, and I'm getting an error when I try and load the editor. What is going on? Right, let's stick in a breakpoint and let's see what's going on. What is tab? Sorry, this it always goes wrong when I try and do things properly. Adding tabs, adding tabs, adding tabs. I suspect this is going to be an artifact of what I've been doing and yeah, adding nodes. Why is it? Now, Special Man, can we see a glimpse of the debugging system? We'll see. And in fact, it's the debugging system which is breaking my environment right now, because I don't know why, but for some reason it is. I thought I'd cleaned out all trace of it, so I wouldn't give the game away. But sorry about this, guys. Who are we? Complete load. Show first. Oh, right, okay. The reason this is breaking is because of the Flow Debugger. I did a slightly too hasty a job trying to remove it. So let me just get it back in and then I can show you later the Flow Debugger in action. Done, done, done. Right, let's try running again. Grind, grind, grind. Yes, so here we are. Let's try reloading again. Yay, there we are. And yes, you can see over here we have the Flow Debugger, but it won't, yeah. I'm not going to show you right now because I have to switch to the dev branch of Node-RED because it's not compatible with the master branch for a couple pieces. So anyway, that's not what we're here for right now. What we're here for right now is a bug where, so let's add in an inject and debug node. Okay, and I'm going to put them down here. And I'm just going to hit deploy so I don't have to keep adding them every time I refresh. So what I can do is, as you know, I can drag a node in, and if I hover this node over the wire, note how the wire goes dotted, and when I release, the node is spliced into that wire. Okay, so there was a bug report came into the forum. Someone who is zoomed out of their workspace. They now try and do the same. Now notice I'm dragging the node over the wire. Maybe I've zoomed out too much for you to be able to see it on the live stream. So if I drag this node over the wire, note how it's no longer going dashed. There's something wrong with the position calculation. So let me see if I drag it on, that's working fine because I've zeroed out my zoom. And dragging this node that's already in the workspace, drag it over the wire, it goes dashed. That's good. If I zoom out and drag this existing node over the wire, note how it doesn't go dashed anymore. So this used to work. I know this used to work because I got this working, but something has changed in the code that is breaking our position calculation of that node as far as hovering over that line. So that's what we are going to try and fix tonight. Okay, so let's go find the right bit of code for that. And I have a workspace chock full of Flow Debugger stuff. So what I might do is will Atom let me have two windows open on the same project? Come on. Project manager, this project's Node-RED. No, it won't. As soon as I select that project, it takes me to the window where it's already open. Okay, I'm going to just close all those windows, and we'll come back to the Flow Debugger another time. What we are interested in tonight is Vue.js. So Vue.js is the code that deals with drawing the flow in the workspace. In here, there should be things talking about splice, because that's what we're doing. We're splicing the wires with the nodes. So we've got this splice active Boolean flag. So that's a flag the Vue uses to keep track of, has it recognized that someone is dragging a node over a link or not, because we might be about to splice it. So I'm just going to quickly scan through where we set it to true. Yeah, I think this is probably the place where are we? That's always a good question. we are inside canvas mouse move. So this gets called whenever the mouse is moving over the workspace. And it does a whole bunch of work. And if we're in the state of moving, as in we are moving a node, then what does it do? Oh no, beg your pardon. I was wrong in my description of splice active. Splice active means the node we're dragging could be used to splice into a wire. So what do I mean there? Well, if we had an inject node only has an output, so you can't drag it onto a wire and join it. Whereas a function node has an input and an output, so it can be spliced. So in fact, splice active means, are we moving a node that could get spliced into a wire? And okay, so having remembered that, what we care about is where we actually test the value. So here we go. Check it's a link splice or a group add. So if splice active, this is the point where I think this must be canvas mouse up. No, it's still in mouse move. If splice active, now rather than do it, because it has to do quite a lot of calculations, we don't do it on every instance of the mouse moving. We only do it every 100 milliseconds, just to minimize the amount of work. Otherwise, just dragging a node could get quite laggy. Now what we're doing here is, this is all the code that does the work to find out are we intersecting a link? You know, are we in the right zone to splice the wire if we were to drop the node? So what we've got is the node's actual position, the one we're moving. So let's just console.log that so we can see. So we're going to have a look and see what that is. Then, if you're on some browsers, we can use this getIntersectionList function that basically says, give us everything that, given this rectangle in the SVG that we draw the workspace in, give us the list of all of the elements that intersect with that rectangle. And then, because Firefox doesn't, or at least didn't, it would be interesting to see actually, can I use getIntersectionList? GetIntersectionList. Firefox still does not support it, which is a real shame. Okay, so Firefox doesn't support it, so in the case of Firefox, or if getIntersectionList doesn't exist, we have got this utility that can do the same work, but obviously not as efficiently as the browser should be able to do that work for us. Anyway, point being, given wherever this node is, we get a list of everything that it intersects with. So let's console.log those nodes. In fact, no, I'm not going to console.log those nodes. Reason being, we're going to get lots of artifacts. So I'm just... Actually, no, I'm going to print out those nodes. You'll see why in a moment. This is the work. This is the thing that then looks at everything it claims that point intersects with, all the elements that point intersects with. It calculates the distance from our point and the center of the thing that has been intersected with, I think. Oh, no. This doesn't do that. Right. Sorry. I'm remembering this code as I go. So at this point, nodes is a list of all the SVG elements our point intersects with. We then have a look to see, is that, for each of those nodes, has it got this class, red UI flow link background? And that's a class we give, if we go and inspect the workspace, this wire is actually made up of 3 SVG paths. We have the path that you can see, so that I can just, if I change its color, you can see it's gone. You can see it's changing color as I muck around with it. We then have its outline. So this is a slightly thicker line behind it. And if I change its color, there you can sort of see. So it's slightly thicker, so it gives a border. And then we have this really quite massive one, which with an opacity of 0. So if I change its opacity to 1, so you can actually see every wire is made up of these bands. If I move this wire, you can sort of see it change. And the reason we do that is because the wires are quite thin, we actually have this invisible thick wire is the click target for that wire. So it means you don't have to be as accurate clicking on the wire. It's got this nice fat border, which is nice. Okay. So what we're doing is we're looking at all the elements we intersect with. We look for any instances of that fatter line, the link background. Even though it's got opacity set to 0, so you can't see it, it's still there in the DOM, so it can still be hit. And then what this does is it basically traverses the entire length of that wire from end to end, and it works out what's the nearest point along that wire to where we clicked. So, or not where we clicked, where the mouse is at that point in time. So if the mouse is kind of up here, it'll work its way all along the wire and then calculate the nearest point. Then it basically it finds the best link, i.e. what's the link we're closest to, because it's possible that you'd have wires crossing each other, so you might intersect more than one. So which one are we actually closest to? And then we highlight it by setting its splice class to, giving it the splice class, which is what gives it the dotted effect. And then we set the active splice link. We will remember what is the one that we've decided is best for this pass. And then 100 milliseconds, we do it all over again, if we need to. Okay, so that's what's going on. And for some reason, when we zoom out, something's going wrong in this code. So what we're going to do is, what are we going to do? We are going to print out what nodes, so what is the intersection list we've stumbled over for this point. Yeah, that's all we're going to do for the moment. So, and let's see what that gives us. Yeah, so if we okay, we're going to drag this function node, so you can see it's lots of stuff coming in the console output. Excuse me, console output. And you can see, okay, so we've got the mouse position, and then the list of nodes. And so you can see every time I'm moving, I'm getting the same 4 things, which are the actual background and whatever grid line I happen to be over at that point in time, and of course the node itself. These are all SVG elements that intersect that point. But our code ignores all of that. Oh, see, you can now see I've got, if I come down here, I've now got 5 items in the node list. This time you can see I've got this link background, which is good, but it's not getting highlighted, and it's not getting highlighted because we do set a minimum threshold. So the squared the square of the distance from the line has to be less than 200 for us to consider it being near enough. So if I come down this far, let's just clear it, and then so when I come over it, we're now close enough, and it's detected that. Why don't we put a final console.log saying best link, so we can see what it's come up with as being right. So when we drag it on, so you can see best link null at the bottom of the console. When I come over it, there we go. So best link is coming up with a path. Cool. So now let's zoom out and see what happens now. Okay, so if we just clear things. Yes, I do have the snap to grid option enabled, but that shouldn't affect things here. So here you can see I've got, what's interesting is whilst I'm zoomed out, you can see the node list, it's only getting, well, 1 or 2, because I'm not always hitting a grid line, which is curious. But I think that's down because it's almost down to fractions of pixels. So I get to here, and, well, you can now see this last item in the list is a flow link background. So it is detecting, if I come down again, that we're close. And then if I'm actually over the wire, now what's curious, when I'm actually over it, note how my, look at that, the node list of what I actually intersect doesn't include the wire at all. But it does if I'm up away from it. And if I go below it, so this is really curious. Essentially what I think is happening yes, I know what's happening. It's to do with, well, it is to do with zooming, because, well, we've seen that that's what happens when the bug happens. So the way we do the zooming is we have a scale factor that gets applied to the workspace. So at this point you have to think we have 2 coordinate systems. We have, yeah, Zoramel, you're ahead of me there. Exactly, yeah. If you want the answer, look in the chat. Zoramel's exactly on the money there. We've got 2 coordinate systems. We've got the coordinates according to the nodes, and obviously when we zoom, their frame of reference doesn't change. They're still at a specific X and Y as far as they're concerned. But as far as the SVG drawing's concerned, we have to scale those coordinates to, because that's how you zoom. You make things smaller, but you also have to change their position. And if you look at this code here, we are pulling out the XY of the node, so that's coordinates in the node coordinate space, and then we pass them straight into get intersection list, which is in the SVG coordinate space. Hence, it's not working. So the problem comes is we need to take into account the scale factor, which should be he says, as simple as, so we have scale factor, which is literally what it says. It is the scale factor. It's either going to be a multiply or divide. The bit I just copied the code from did a divide, but let's see. So we're dividing the xy by the scale factor. We refresh and we drag this node on. So this is no zoom, and that works nicely. If we now zoom out quite a bit and we drag down, okay, that's not worked. Yeah, that's not worked. Okay. So should it be multiply by the scale factor? I don't think it should, but let's see. So we zoom out, we come down. Ah, there, that's now working. So yes, it's multiply by the scale factor. There you go, I knew it was going to be one or the other. Cool, well that's the bug fixed in that scenario. But if you recall, I said Firefox, so the fix I've done is in this code that uses the get intersection list built in. But you'll remember here, we say Firefox doesn't do that. So we want to get links at point, mouse X, mouse Y. And what I don't know is whether get links at point does anything with regard the scale factor. So it's an X and Y. So this gets the bounding box, which will be in SVG terms. So in fact, we need to take into account here. In fact, this is a good question. Firefox. I don't have Firefox installed. Okay. I'm not going to entertain you by getting Firefox installed. First time on this new laptop I've needed to test on Firefox. Not to worry. I will verify this fix later, but if we just scale these values, because I think it's true to say, okay, so this is the other thing to go check. Where else do we use get links at point? So the other place we use that is, interesting. So notice, okay, this is another place in the code. This code is dealing with what happens when I drag a node from the palette, because that's, when I'm dragging inside here, I'm dragging an SVG element around the SVG space. It's in one space. What I do over here, though, is I'm dragging a DOM HTML element outside of SVG over the top of the SVG. And there's the question of, does that work? Now, curiously, it did flash up the dotted lines for a moment then. So there's something going on here. So this is another bit of code. But you can see here, you can see it is dealing with the scale factor. And that's because, because mouse X is being calculated in terms of browser position, and you can see I do a divide. So I divide it by the scale here rather than multiply it by the scale, which is curious because that's exactly the opposite of what I found I had to do in here. So what is going on? What is going on? Good question, Nick. See, I reckon if we're being consistent, I mean, this is funny. I know I've tested this code and it was working, but what I'm seeing here is kind of fundamentally duff. You know, it's fundamentally not what it should be. Oh no. Right, okay, yeah, I'm getting mixed up. Back to where we were. This is dragging here, mouse X, mouse Y comes from the node's position, and that is the node's, in terms of the node coordinate space. To get to the real world space, we have to multiply by the scale factor before we do the calculations in the real world. Here, let me just undo the changes I just did, because here, mouse X is, whenever we drag, and this is coming from the HTML side, not the inside of the SVG, whenever we drag, this is calculating mouse X and mouse Y with its frame of reference being real world coordinates, and those are the right coordinates to pass through to these various functions. Now I'm going to ignore group timer for the moment, but there's something we're going to have to fix there in a minute, because down here mouse X and mouse Y are in the real world space, and that's good. And for some reason we divide by scale here, which would convert them to the node space, but we don't want to be in the node space. And we've just modified get links at point. Okay. We have just modified get links at point. Maybe we shouldn't have done get links at point. Right, I'm going to add a comment here. X, Y must be in SVG coordinate space. If they come from a node X, Y, they will need to be scaled using scale factor. First. Okay, so having reverted that change and added a comment so we don't forget it in the future, what we've just said is we want to make sure mouse X and mouse Y at this point are in scale factor space, are in, yeah. And then down, yeah, we need mouse X and mouse Y to always be in the right coordinate space. So rather than do it bit by bit, let's just do it once when we get the values up here. Then it's going to have the right be in the right coordinate space for both of those calls. Okay, let's remove debug because I inevitably will leave it in place. Yeah, so X and Y, it's all about coordinate space. That's what's going wrong here. So when we're up here, mouse X, mouse Y is already in real world coordinate space, so we can just use them as is there. And at this point, we've said X and Y should still be in real world space. Yes, because we use, yeah. So we don't want to scale. And likewise down here, we don't want to scale. So that's all good. I think what has introduced the bug is when we added the group stuff. Because here, independently of doing the splice timer, we check, are we dragging over a group? And you can see here, we are scaling mouse X, mouse Y. We're permanently, we're not just changing it locally, we are changing mouse X, mouse Y we're scaling it, and we're scaling it to the other coordinate space, and then calling red.view.getGroup at point with that X and Y. So let's go back and look at getGroup at point, just to see what coordinate space it expects this X and Y to be in. Well, looking through it, what it's doing is it's comparing the X and Y we pass in directly with the X and Y properties of the group nodes. So that means X and Y here are expected to be in node coordinate space. So the exact opposite of get object at point, whatever it was. So that's unfortunate that they're inconsistent. I'm not going to take the leap to try and make them consistent. But so it's right that this is scaling X, the mouse X, mouse Y. The problem is, though, as soon as it does that scale, up here, down here, X and Y have been scaled incorrectly. So what we're going to do is, rather than modify, we're going to take a local copy of, well, use local variables as the scaled values. So mouse X, mouse Y stay in the SVG coordinate space, but within this function we can now use mx and my, which have been scaled to the node and group coordinate space. Okay, let's see if any of that works. Let's do a few tests. Right, let's just drag a node on. This is the original case. Dragging that over doesn't work. Okay, so I've mucked that up. Good. Oops. Let's go figure out what's gone wrong there. So console.log mouse X, mouse Y. So it's always the way you you think you've got it, you take out all your debug, and then you realize, nope, you haven't got it. And you have to go back and add in your debug again. So there's a number of times I've committed console.logs in the code because I've forgotten to remove them. I tend to err on removing them as soon as I think I can, so I don't forget them. Okay, so without any zooming, that's working. We zoom out. we drag around, and what we're looking for is, okay, so there it's, yeah, it's not hitting it for some reason. Why is it not hitting it? Is the problem to do with mouse X, mouse Y? We're in the right coordinate space. I don't see what has changed given the code we had just now. Because we're scaling X and Y, so that gets passed through, and so these X and Y is definitely in. We go from node space to SVG space. So X and Y, mouse X, mouse Y are definitely in the SVG coordinate space. So then we come down here. You can see in some of this debug, you can see it has, it is realizing we're near the link, but it's not hitting it for some reason. So that, okay, well that means we're doing something. We are going to be iterating over this link, over the link. No, that's going to be. May live to regret adding that console.log, but so now what it's going to be doing is going to log the when we get close there. So these are all the distances from our point to the line, and you can see it's never getting close. At its closest, it's about 1600. Okay, which is okay because we're outside the zone. And as I come closer, you can see, I'm just looking for the example because I didn't. No, let's do this cleaner. Right, I drag it over and that got spliced. So there you can see actually the minimum distance got down to 0 because I was right over the wire, which is nice. If we undo that, and now let's zoom out quite a way. When I drag that over, interestingly, look at all our distances, they've gone massive. They really have gone absolutely haywire. So why is that? Are we getting muddled in our coordinates? I mean, are we getting things muddled up? I'm wondering if the coordinate space isn't what I think it should be down here. I'm wondering if because it was working when I had this time scale factor just here and I had the original mouse X, mouse Y passing down. So maybe I was wrong to scale them in both places, and maybe I shouldn't be scaling them down here, which seems a bit odd to me. But hey, if our testing shows it works, it works. So there there's the case, not zoomed out, it splices okay. We zoom out, we come near it, yeah, and it splices okay. Okay, so I made a potentially duff assumption about that. Okay, that's working. Now here's the test. We drag it on from the canvas, and yeah, at no time is it hitting the wire. So is this the same? Is the problem here that I'm wrong in saying, okay, what I've just shown is we get the node coordinates x and y, we scale it, so we convert it to the SVG coordinates when we do the get intersection or get links at point. But then when we walk along the length of the wire looking for our nearest point, I have to use it back in the node coordinate space, not the SVG coordinate space. Now I don't fully understand why that's the case, but yeah, my eyes, the testing we've just done tells us that's the case. So I do wonder, having done that work, if at this point we should be scaling those values. And I think I'm right in saying a divide at this point. And then wherever we've got, we use the scaled variance inside that loop. Let's see. Okay, so let's reload. Make sure I've not broken the non-zoom case. Okay, I have broken the non-zoom case. Awesome. Let me just double check. Is red.vue.scale the right thing to be calling? Yeah. Oh, how have I broken this then? Oh, is it? No, that was all right, because that's in the group timer, and it doesn't modify the mouse X, mouse Y. So the silly thing is, when I'm not zoomed at all, red.vue.scale is 1. So MX, this doesn't change the value. This should be working. It was working before. Why is it not working now? So let's add in our debug nodes so we can see what nodes are we intersecting with. And then down here, we're going to excuse me, I'm just writing some code that will just remember the smallest distance, and rather than print out a long list of values, I'm just going to print out the nearest we get to the wire. And I'm doing that so we can sort of see orders of magnitude. Are the numbers 1,000, orders of magnitude bigger than we'd expect or not? Okay, so you can see I'm hitting the node list as I come near the wire. There we are. So I'm getting near the wire, but look at my distance, it's 31,000. So why are we 31,000? What is going on? What have I mucked up? That's what I've mucked up. I set mx to be mx divided by the scale, and I set my to be mx. The number of times a typo like that has bugged me up. You get your x's and y's muddled, or worse still. So there we are. So it is now working for the non-zoom case. Awesome. We like that. Let's zoom out. We now drag round. We come near the wire. Okay, it's working. It's a little sensitive. In fact, look, that's quite interesting. Look how it's still active when the wire is just skirting the top edge of the node. And as I move up, just as the wire hits the midpoint, it thinks I'm not skirting it anymore. Now, what's going on there? I'll tell you what's going on there. And again, it's a bad assumption about coordinate systems. When I drag this node, we use the nodes x and y in the node space. And that x and y point is actually right in the center of the node body. So when I bring it down, it's right in the center. When I drag this element in from the side, its x and y is actually its top left corner. I think. No, it's not the top left corner, but it's not in the center. At least its x coordinate isn't. Right, let's don't care. Let's print out mouse x, mouse y. And in here, yeah, we're honing in on it. We're almost there. So oh, I think I just killed the runtime. Yes. I found there is a known NodeMon bug on Apple M1 hardware where after a certain number of restarts, it just craps out. Okay, here we are. So as we bring, look how, as I bring the function dragged from the palette over the wire, you can see lots of numbers. The key numbers, though, is the pair of numbers. I'm not worried about you can see there it's about 390. You can see 390s, that's the Y position, and that's the one I really care about for this exercise. Now, once the node's dragged, and now when I pull it, we're now getting the node coordinates. So there you can see it's hitting, it's 400, not 390, which is curious. I mean, visually they're in the same position, but this node is 10, it thinks its Y coordinate is 10 pixels lower. Now, if I drag in a function and hover it over the top, look, they're pretty much the same size, but there's this 10 pixel discrepancy. Now, I kind of know why that is. It's going to be it's basically all this code that tries to calculate what's going on. For now, I'm just going to add a fudge factor of +10. So when we drag this function on, because it's always bugged me, look, when I drop the function node here, which is pretty much lined up on a grid line, and I let go, notice how the node actually gets placed on a grid cell lower. It's like an off by one error. It always doesn't quite land where you expect it. Because if you're with grid snapping on, you can see I've lined that up nicely on a grid line. And if I release the mouse, it's dropping down to the next one. Which has always bugged me, and I've never quite got to the bottom of it. What I do wonder is start, stop, drag. No, sorry, I'm getting that. Time's getting on, and I for Nat's sake, I do want to briefly show you the Flow Debugger. So let's focus on what we're trying to debug, right? This is when you end up down a rabbit hole. Right, I've zoomed out. Let's drag this function on. Okay, that's looking better now, as in it's less, sort of the zone of it hitting is now more centered vertically on the node. Let's just try out some other. Yeah, so that's feeling pretty good. If I zoom out, except that was a bad test because we're meant to be dealing in dragging from the side, not existing ones. But yeah, you can see that wire is pretty much cutting through the center of the node and it to activate. If I go off to one side, it doesn't, but yeah. Let's make it really, don't know if this makes it, there you go. Yeah, so again, that wire is just about going through the center and it's activating. Just do the horizontal case. Yeah. Cool. So that's working. Now, there was that bit of code to do with dropping into groups. I just want to test that I haven't broken. So you can see how it's recognizing when I'm dragging over the group. But this far zoomed out, it's working as expected. And so what we haven't tested is what happens if you're zoomed in. Yeah, drag that node over the group, it's working. Come over the wire, it's working. Excellent. Yeah, I think we've cracked the scaling issues. Let me revert some of this debug. Don't see any more debug in that one. Views. That one. Cool. And I think we're done. We are done with this fix. So, just scanning through, looking for any more console.logs because, yeah, chances are I will have left one in somewhere. But so not only have we put in fixed the bug, I've also added some comments to help me in the future. But I think there's a separate piece of work to perhaps standardize what coordinate space some of these functions expect things in. I mean, they're all internal. They aren't functions I expect other consumers to use, but well, maybe one day they will. Fix scaling issues when dragging nodes into scaled workspace. Something like that. Not my most elegant message. Still need to find out why running git commit takes ages, but that's for another night. Just pull the latest down, and of course it's a rebase, so it's got to redo the commit, so it's got to hang for a few seconds. Yeah. Cool. Right, very quickly. Git checkout dev git stash apply npm install. Because the 2.0 release, we've updated a whole bunch of the dependencies across major versions. You've got to run npm install whenever you switch between dev and master. And actually it's much cleaner in dev now because we've updated to the latest stuff. It's got rid of a whole bunch of stuff. And yeah, everything's awesome. It's always a pain to go back to master because it takes it takes a while to install now. To install the dev stuff. Okay, so this is a very quick preview, world exclusive preview of the Flow Debugger that I've been playing with. Massive work in progress. It's much more spending time trying to get the user experience right, and sort of incrementally adding bits of functionality, working out what's the impact on the user experience, what do we need to be able to do. So here we have an environment, and I've got the Flow Debugger installed, and you can see at the moment it is disabled. In fact, I'm going to leave the JavaScript console open, just help me. So what we do, so at the moment, these flows will just run normally. There's absolutely nothing different about the runtime. And I will stress, everything the Flow Debugger does, it's done as a plugin. So it can be an optional install, it can be completely disabled. Yeah, we haven't decided exactly whether it gets bundled by default or what, but here we go. So you have the disable button. I click that, and that enables the Flow Debugger. At the moment, the code is, when you enable the Flow Debugger, it has 3 breakpoints literally hard-coded. And yeah, I don't misuse the word literally. I do mean it hard codes in setting some breakpoints, because, well, a few days ago I had no way to create breakpoints in the UI, but this is what you get. So you can see in the workspace I've got 3 breakpoints. When you hover over a breakpoint, it gets highlighted in the workspace, and you can temporarily disable breakpoints so they won't do anything. You can click the X to remove the breakpoint entirely, or you can come over and by clicking it toggles whether it's enabled, disabled as the light blue case. Click again and it will get removed if I move my mouse off it, but if I click again it gets re-enabled. So yeah, so there we have some breakpoints. So now let's inject a message to hit a breakpoint. So you can see, well, you can't really see, and this is something I need to improve, that this breakpoint has got a green border to highlight this is the breakpoint that's caused the flows to pause. And you see flows pause, it says at the top. And what you get here is, this is now a queue of all the messages that are building up in the system. And I only have one. And again, when I hover over this message, you can see you get the breakpoint in the workspace gets an orange dotted line to show where that message is. So let's say I now inject another message. I don't know if it comes across on the live stream, but you get a little animated pulse whenever a message arrives at a port. So because the flows are paused, every time I inject a message, it's getting held at this output. And now you can start seeing a count of how many messages are being held at those different points. And you can see the list of messages is growing down the side here. And then what I can do is a couple of controls. Play will resume the flows and everything will just flow. Or I can click this button to do a step. And what that does is it will take the top message off this list and pass it to wherever it's going. So in this instance, this top message is being passed into the switch node. So I click step, and you can see the count on the inputs gone because that message is left, and now that message has come to the output of the switch node and will be at the bottom of this list. And then if I step again, you can see each of those messages from the inject node are moving down the wire to the switch node. And as each time I step, so you can sort of see the messages work their way through. And that's, yeah, so at the moment, whilst things are paused, it doesn't matter which node you trigger, the messages get held. The messages do not pass down wires. And that's cool. So at this point, given this queue of messages, and this is literally what I was doing about 2 hours ago before I had to stop to cook dinner for the kids, you can look at the message, and just like in debug, you can copy a path to any element, you can copy it, but you get a little pencil. And what happens if you click the pencil is it opens it up in the Json Editor. So here you can see that message as JSON. Now, this is opening it up in the Json Editor is literally like 2 lines of code because we have all these bits built into Node-RED to tie things together. And if I go into the visual editor, I have noticed the visual editor, the JSON visual editor, something's gone wrong. And you can see in the UI, the gutter is overlapping the content. So that's a bug. I haven't looked to see if that's a bug in master in 1.3.4, if this is something that's got broken in dev. But yeah, so here you've got the JSON editor. So I could come in and say, actually I want this heater bed. I want to test what happens if my temperature hits 200. Hit done. And at the moment it doesn't do anything. But JSON Rpc. I think this flow is one I pasted in from the forum that someone needed some help with, which is why it talks about Json Rpc. In fact, pretty much everything you see on this screen is me debugging things for the forum. But the point being, what I want to get to is where you can edit the message, and when you hit done, it will write those changes back in to the runtime. And then when you release the message has that updated value. So, I think that would be interesting tools. But I think there's a lot of work to do. For example, we know messages aren't always JSON encodable. So I haven't really, going to have to figure what does that mean when I hit the edit. The JSON editor is convenient, but it might need to be something slightly different if we want it to be able to edit non-JSON. If there's a buffer or something like that, do we need a message editor that can do more? Or maybe maybe on the first version, we just limit ourselves to modifying individual discrete values. I don't know. And then when I talk about workflows, I recognize that, if you've got busy flows with lots of messages coming in on MQTT and they're all paused, it will be a real pain if you're just trying to debug one flow for you to step. And by the time you've done a bit of debugging, you might have like 50 messages queued up here, and you have to step through. The clear that backlog before the message you care about moves on. So I'm trying to think what are the useful scenarios. So at the moment, step just literally pops the next message off the global queue of messages wherever it happens to be. I mean, very much influenced by like the JavaScript debugger, where you can step into a function or step out of a function. I'm trying to think what's the logic for saying, given a particular message, for example, given this message, step through the life of this message. So, let other message events happen in other flows, or maybe it's, pick a set of connected nodes and it's step until you get another message event on this flow, or step until you hit another breakpoint, maybe, which is kind of the play button, because that's how that will work. So I don't know. I think it's going to take some real world experience of what's useful. So I'm keen to get to the point where at least these basic tools are there, so we can release an initial version. Assume we'll also inspect global flow values while paused. Yeah, so the context data sidebar doesn't know about the flow debugger. The flow debugger, I don't think the flow debugger needs to do anything additional with global and flow values, because we have the context sidebar. So that isn't something it's not something I'm going to spend any time thinking about. Like I said, there might be additional features like being able to change flow and global values, but one thing at a time. So there we are. So that's the flow debugger. The fun part of it is the interface between one of the things I'm contemplating is, could we have a command line client, so be able to attach to a running Node-RED instance without using the UI. I don't even know if that makes sense, but there we are. But again, not something I'm going to rush to spend time on, as I think the UI version. Would we set breakpoints inside functions? No, that isn't in scope. This is debugging the flow. I don't think we have any meaningful way to trigger the debug. I don't know if you can put the whole Node.js runtime into a debugger inside the function code. I mean, maybe that's going to be I can see some very hard problems to solve to support doing that, but and then the other sorts of things I can imagine is being able to set conditions on these breakpoints. So not simply that a message has arrived, but a message has arrived and it has met some condition. The other thing I'm considering is being able to put implicit debug. So at the moment, I really like this UI I've come up with for setting the breakpoints. And again, this is all in a plugin. So this is not core Node-RED code. This is something that plugs into, and there are some changes in the dev code to support doing this sort of plugging into the UI. But it would be nice. Often we get asked, it'd be nice to be able to add in debug nodes without having to wire them in. Just be able to say, show me any message coming out of this port. So, yeah, that's something else I'm wondering about. That again, you'd have to enable the Flow Debugger. So this wouldn't be a feature of the debug nodes we have. The Flow Debugger would add the ability for you to say, on this port, it's not a breakpoint, it's a inspect port or something, and then automatically send messages to debug, which would be interesting. Yeah. But as I said, at the moment, this is all operating at the level of messages passing between nodes. The nodes remain sealed boxes that we don't look inside. So, yeah, not currently proposing to come up with any way for stepping through the internal logic of a node. That's out of scope, frankly, of the Flow Debugger at this point in time. As you see, there's still plenty to be done. And there's also, weird quirks that so you can manually pause the runtime. Now, there are some weird quirks still to figure out, like what happens if I deploy whilst the flows are paused? What happens to the messages? All sorts of headaches. Because, there's just all sorts of headaches. So, not really ready for prime time, but yeah. And then anytime you can disable the Flow Debugger and everything just starts running again, which is nice. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I found a bug. If I disable it, then it loses its... Yeah, I know. I broke that earlier today, and I know what needs to be changed to fix that. So that's the Flow Debugger. As I say, very much work in progress. Wasn't my plan to do this for 2.0, and but it occurred to me that there are some changes needed in the core of Node-RED to support some of the things we want the Flow Debugger to be able to do. So I wanted to make some progress on the Flow Debugger so we can get those changes into 2.0, so that when we're ready to release the Flow Debugger, those pieces are already there from the get-go. And yeah, it's fun. What I've sort of enjoyed is I also I've been doing all the back end, the node side of this in TypeScript rather than vanilla JavaScript, which has been just an interesting education, as I've not used TypeScript before. So if you're not familiar, TypeScript is a variation of JavaScript where you basically, it's strongly typed. So you can see here I say, like, I have this variable called breakpoints, which is a map from strings to a breakpoint type, and breakpoint is a type I define somewhere else, I can't remember where. And that's nice because then I just declare it as a regular JavaScript map, but wherever I do any work, like set or what have you, the TypeScript compiler will validate that I'm using the right types with it, and it will shout at me if I try and misuse it. It's okay. It's been a useful education in learning more about TypeScript, not having really played with it before, and just how you set up a Node-RED project using TypeScript. It has been fun slowly building this up. there we are. So, yeah, keep an eye out for that at some point. As you can see, lots still to do with it. Lots of, well, ultimately, it's going to need some real world experience of you guys with your real flows trying to debug a problem to tell me are these useful bits of function. And as ever with Node-RED, this is one of the challenges I have. I spend all my time developing Node-RED itself. I don't create big, complicated flows. You know, I think some of the flows you guys are creating have long since outstripped the sorts of flows I create, because I tend to use some very simple, noddy things locally. You know, I have done big, complex things, but day in, day out, I don't tend to. So this is looking forward to getting feedback from the community about how useful it is. Knowing, you know, version 1, it's going to have a set of functionality. Is it going to be the right set of functionality? I don't know. No doubt people will complain it doesn't do what they would like it to do, but hey, it'll do more than they had before I wrote it. So cool. Well, it's coming up on the half hour. I'm going to wrap it up at this point. So as ever, thank you very much for joining. Do all the usual things. Like and subscribe, do follow me, do subscribe, do whatever you would like to do. And yeah, we will do some Node-RED user live streams at some point. And I think it might be quite cool to get some of you guys from the community involved with those, for you guys to share more about what you do with Node-RED, and share that with the community. I think, yeah, maybe do a once a month community call where it's not me talking to you guys, it's you guys sharing what you're doing with the community. But stay tuned. Hopefully we'll think more about how we can go about doing that in the near future. Otherwise, I'm going to say farewell, good night, and enjoy the rest of your days. And like that, I say goodbye.